Alright guys, when we last left off, I had just sourced a new motor for our 79 F-350 Supercab build, but it was still 40 miles down south, so I had to head down, get it out of the vehicle that it was currently in. Alright guys, ready to pick up the 460? I've got my engine hoist, I've got a tire to set the motor in, I've got some wood blocks just in case, I've got some chains, and then inside the cab, let me show you what I'm bringing. I've got a couple of buckets of bolts, medium size, mostly metric, and then larger ones. That's going to be so I have some place to anchor the chain on the motor. And then just some basic tools, nothing too impressive, just normal stuff. Hopefully I won't run into any issues. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna be grabbing those fuel tanks too. So I should grab the quick disconnects for the fuel lines, and I should grab one of these cutters just in case. Yeah, these quick disconnects. That way I can pull the fuel system. All right, I'll get these loaded up and then we'll be ready to go. All right guys, it's Saturday morning. It looks like the mechanic got it most of the way disassembled. They said the only thing is the motor mounts and the bell housing. He's on his way over to finish that up. Nice, we got one hook here. Hopefully there's another one hidden back there, make this a little bit easier to pull out. Right now I am working on the fuel tanks. Pretty straightforward. Luckily I remembered those fuel clippings, and then I was able to just cut off the connector like that. Hopefully I can splice this into the 79 and we'll be good to go. Easy peasy. Let's get this unclipped and get these suckers out of here. I gotta stop saying suckers. Got two fuel tanks there, the exhaust motor. Was able to get my lift back in there. Good to go. First things first, I'm going to drain the oil, and you guessed it, send in a sample of that oil to Blackstone Labs for analysis. That way we can figure out what is going on internally, at least as far as the oil is concerned. The next thing I'm going to do is pull off these valve covers, and we're going to take a look inside. So a few people have noticed that I occasionally wear my shirts inside out. The reason for that is because I absolutely, positively cannot stand the feeling of those tags on my skin. So when I sleep in the shirt, it's inside out because it's more comfortable. And then sometimes I forget to make it right side out. Don't knock it till you try it, that's what I say. Right now I'm just pulling off all the goodies that are in the way of that valve cover. Back here is the EGR lines. That takes exhaust gas and it replumbs it back into the intake to burn it twice, just make it a little bit cleaner. It actually lowers the in-cylinder temperature as well. Up in the front, I was removing the air pump hoses. Now the air pump plumbs fresh air into the exhaust directly after the combustion while the gases are still hot, as just a way to make it run a little bit cleaner. As far as I know, there's no modern vehicle that still uses an air pump because the new fuel injection systems are just that clean. Wow guys, this is a night and day difference compared to the valve covers on the 400. If you remember those little galleys in there, the little oil galleys, those were all clogged up with gasket material. You can see these gaskets, they look like they've never been off. They've at least never leaked. The other one had all kinds of gasket material on the inside. All of the valve seals are looking nice inside. There's hardly any carbon buildup. There's no oil coking, nothing. It is really nice looking in here. All right guys, I am very excited about the internals of this motor so far. What I'd like to do is take off the exhaust manifold and the upper plenum, and then I can kind of get a look at the valves from the inside, and then as long as that's looking good, I'm going to set it aside, wait for the oil sample, move on to that body. Now the two bolts in the rear of the exhaust manifold were both broken, so I had to take great care to not break any more. The front ones came off pretty easy, just a little bit of work with the breaker bar, but that one, the rearmost one that was still hanging in there, that one was ready to break. So I ended up using a little bit of PB Blaster to kind of lubricate those threads, and then I struck it with a little tool here, you see, just to kind of shock load that bolt and see if it can break it free. It was It was touch and go for a minute here, but luckily I got it without breaking. All right, with the headers off, you can kind of see inside a little bit. Valves are looking fine. A little bit of buildup on these back ones because they were leaking pretty bad. You can see they were all leaking at one point. Not a ton, except for these two. These two were leaking a lot. And of course you see two broken off bolts. These are gonna take a little while to get out. I'm gonna have to just kind of work on them. I'll use some penetrating lubricant, PV Blaster specifically, and then I'll wait a while, and then I'll vice grip them, and then twist a little bit, and then wait, and just keep repeating that until it comes out. On the back here, you can see that the cast iron was broken off, but I think I can see 5 threads on the inside, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research and see if I can use a longer bolt, if those 5 threads will be enough for the torque specs on the headers that are gonna be installed, or if I'm gonna have this addressed. But happy to see the valves looking good. Alright guys, I'm doing some calculations to try and figure out what the minimum thread engagement is for that one bolt that goes into the cast iron head for the exhaust manifold. Now online here I'm at engineersedge.com because I'm not smart enough to know these off the top of my head. I'm barely smart enough to figure out how I can get the inputs into their calculators. So after doing a little bit of math here, we figured out that our tensile stress area is 0.08362 because of another calculator that they offer. And then the only other things I need to know are the diameter of the bolt and the threads per inch, which is really easy because it's a 3/8 bolt with a 16 thread count. Now the minimum thread engagement length required is going to be 0.31838. And I have 0.375, just exactly 3/8 available of thread usage. So I've got 6 threads available. I only need 5 in order to still be able to torque this down to spec, which means we are good to go, and I do not need to replace that head, at least for that reason. All right, it's time to organize all these engine parts here, set this engine off to the side until I'm able to get that report back from Blackstone. Next step is going to be this dent here. I was trying to decide if I wanted to do the dent or if I wanted to keep stripping this down of all the chrome and get the front end off, but this has got me intrigued. So I'm gonna jump in here, cut out that hole for the 6x9 speaker, start building a tool that'll fit down in there. I've got 3.5 hours before the in-laws come over for Memorial Day lunch. Hopefully that's enough time to have the hole in there and the tool made, and then just start to pry it and see if it comes out. Alright, I've got that plastic molded piece in here along with the jump seats to try and just double check that I've got enough room for the 6x9 speaker down here and see exactly where I can put it, but it's pretty straightforward. I can put it wherever I feel like. So right now I'm looking at putting it right up to this edge right here. So let me get that cut out. Alright, right in there, that's our little dent. What's nice is you can see there's some support here. It's double walled and then it's reinforced on the inside. So we should get a nice surface to push against that, and then right here is going to be our pivoting point down there. So let's start making up a mock-up of a tool. Alright, let's take a peek ski at our steel selection here. What I'm thinking about using, I got a whole bunch of these for free. It's just 3/8 16 all thread. I think I'm probably going to use one of these and just destroy it by bending it up to the shape I want. And then over here is the good stuff. So what I'll probably end up using is something from this stack up here. It's about the right length and some of it's pretty thick, like this little guy right here. I'll probably use that once I get the angle just right. So let's get that angle. The angle of the dangle. Alright guys, I've got that all thread bent up kind of how I like it. Let me show you what I was going for here. Imagine this is a bird's eye view of the dent. The dent is going to be right here. This is the outer skin. This is the inner skin. This is the hole right here where I cut the 6x9. And this is the reinforcement where the body mount is on the underside. So right here is double plated, so we've got a good strong piece of steel right here that we can leverage against to get this dent out. So this was the first piece with the all thread right here. I'm changing up my design just a little bit. I'm only going to do one bend in it, and then I'm going to make it straight, and then I'm going to add a little bit of leverage right here, and I'm going to try and give it like a nice little pad so that it can pivot on it smoothly and get this pushed out this way nice and easy. That's the idea. I'm going to use this piece of steel here for it. I think it's an 1.5 inches, maybe 1 3/8. It's pretty thick. I think it's 11 or 12 gauge, so almost 1/8 of an inch thick. Should be pretty strong. What I'm going to do is probably V-notch it so that I can then get this one bend out of it, and then I'll go ahead and weld on another small portion of this rounded edge as a little pad for it to pivot on. And then we'll put it in the vehicle and just see if it works. Now this is my cold cut saw that I love so much. Right now I'm just chopping the end off to make it a little bit shorter, and then here I'm V-notching it. So I'm doing a series of cuts. The first cut in the middle is pretty deep, almost all the way through, and then I do some smaller cuts next to it so I can then just kind of bend it by hand. Here I'm cleaning up the V-notch with the grinder and then making a nice clean surface to weld on. Alright guys, the Mark I prototype is all completed. We've got this nice little bend here, came out really good. We've got this nice little pivoting point. I'm very happy with these welds. I'm still using my CO2 gas, haven't ran out of it yet, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. And then I've got this end piece here. I didn't really explain what this end piece is going to be. The reason it's dilly dangling off the edge here is so that I can get a little bit of flex on it if needed. I really want to be soft and gentle when I'm pushing on that steel here. If I did not weld this piece on, then I'd have a sharp lip like this, and then I would end up with little crescent shaped dimples pushing this out on the way, which is what a normal body shop would do if they could get to it from behind it, because they would just sand it down and body fill it, but that is not what we're doing. So we're trying to be gentle, ease that sucker out, and then we'll be good to go. So overall, I was pretty happy with this tool. If you notice, it's a little bit difficult to get in there. That's because that dent was pushed in like 2.5 inches. That was a pretty bad dent, and it was in a pretty bad spot. So the tool worked pretty good to get the initial kind of bumps out of it. You see here, there are a couple spots I think you're going to notice on the bottom there that I pushed a little bit too hard, and it did dimple just a hair. And that's because the angle was just never perfect to get a nice clean push on it. So I knew what I was going to have to do was basically push the entire thing out just a hair more than it needed to be, so that I could then go to it from the outside. This is a cool inside shot, I thought. That was a little hard to get the GoPro in there for you.
America.
Alright guys, it is Tuesday morning. I'm trying to get the dent on the other side finished pretty soon here. I've got a little cardboard cutout of the shape of the corner on that side, so now we'll take a look at the one on this side. You see, we're getting there. I've got this tape here so that I can follow this line, try and get it as close as possible. You see here, we're getting there. It's awfully close. One of our bigger issues is going to be now this dent is sticking out because of the way it crumpled in and kind of popped this top out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a wooden frame that I can then fit on the inside through that speaker hole. So should be pretty straightforward. Just going to follow this line on a piece of wood. I'm going to cut it thin, and then I need to cut this angle down here and then this angle to kind of make a nice little V. And then I'll slide the piece of wood inside, and then in the space between the piece of wood and the steel, I can just keep putting in shims until it's nice and flush against it, and it'll allow me to get the tools on this side without having it dimple back in. That's the plan. We'll see how it works. Alright guys, let me show you how the mold is looking. Very, very close. So let's go to the other side. We're We're getting there. Awfully close. So this is the piece that's going to go on the inside there. Alright, so I still need to do these 2 angle cuts. And I've got it marked out on the side there. I was using my little angle finder to get those just right. And I've got my table saw set up. Let me show you. Alright guys, I'm getting ready to put my little wood wedge in there. On the back side, I've got a few shims that I'm going to try to just kind of stuff in there as needed. Once it's all the way in there, I'll show you guys with the camera, but I'm pretty excited. This should go pretty well. Once that's in there, it gives me a nice backing so that I can get the planishing hammer out and start to smooth it all out. Alright guys, this is how it looks in there. I was able to get it really tight up against that. I'm very happy. Now it's time to beat a little bit. Now this can be one of the most frustrating aspects of body repair because the goal is to hit it with a hammer enough to where you can bend the metal back in, but not so much that you go too far. So having that piece of wood on the back helps a lot, but you can still strike it just a little bit too hard and dimple right back through it the other direction. So here I'm using a piece of hardwood. I love using hardwood on body panels because you can hit it a little bit harder than you can with metal. It's a little bit more forgiving, and then you can use pieces that have different curves to them. And then of course the wood will start to flex more than steel would and get you that nice little curve that you need. What I'm using here is an air hammer with a planishing die to just kind of smooth out those last little bits. And this one is adjustable, and so I've got it on its lowest setting right now, so it takes a lot of force to really move that steel because I'm just finishing up those last little wrinkles and trying to smooth it out as close as I can. It's hard to tell because the paint was so damaged in this process, but man, I got that shape close. Guys, this mold worked really well. You can see it took quite a beating, but it stayed true to form. This was a wooden piece that I made. You see it has a little taper to it. It acted as a wedge because the angle was just a little bit off, so I was able to hammer that down in there up against this to really keep that piece forced against it. This is how it looks now. Let me go get that wooden piece so I can show you. Oh, it's right here. Man, it's close. I mean, it is just really nice looking. I know obviously the lack of paint is concerning and it looks terrible probably on camera, but what I'm thinking about doing is I'll probably fill this in with touch-up after I do some light sanding around and make the repair look similar to how I did it on the hood. So don't worry if it doesn't look good to you right now. If you do metal work, I think you'll think, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But if you don't do metal work, I think it'll look pretty terrible. But never fear, I'll get it on track. Alright guys, there's something that I really don't want to do, and you know what that means? I should probably be doing it right now. And that is removing this entire front clip. It's not going to be super fun because I have a feeling that at least a couple of these nuts or bolts are going to be rusted out, and I don't know the wiring on a 79 F-350 Supercab as well as I know the wiring on something like a Crown Vic. Plus, new vehicles are much better about making sure that every single clip on the entire harness is unique, so there's no way to crisscross anything. And sometimes these old ones will use a few of the same connectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label every connector along the way where it went, at least where I think it went for the ones that aren't here anymore, and then I'll move that off to the side and then just slowly start removing all of the panel pieces. It's a shame because the fit is perfect, you know, because it's old, but these clamshell Fords, the ones that have the hoods where they just open up like that, they're really simple to align, and I've never had any issues getting them lined up afterwards. So you can tell, I think by my voice, I'm not thrilled about this, but it's got to be done. So I'm going to jump on the electrical now, and then I'll film the front end disassembly for you guys, because that'll be interesting to see. All right. So a surprisingly large amount of you really enjoy hearing tool sounds in my time lapses. That was a little bit of a surprise that I learned through reading the comments, but this project, well, this removal of the front end took a lot longer than I wanted it to, and so I did the time lapse with just the still photography, as you can see here. Now, I was blown away at how easy this front end came off. Every single bolt came off with no fight whatsoever. None of them were rusted, none of them broke off. Alright guys, what I'm working on right now is the parking brake. These can be a real pain in the keister, The cable runs down along the body and then it goes from the body to the frame. Let me show you underneath the issue that I'm having. So you can see the brake line runs along the body to right here is where it mates with the frame. Now this is pretty easy to remove. You just push these little tabs in, you can pop it out. I've already pulled these dilly dangling cables off of right here, so it's all good to go there. But this bolt, the adjustment bolt, is a little bit rusted up. So I have a set of vice grips on the little square head of that bolt, and I started to unscrew it, and I was getting a lot of friction because there's just a little buildup of surface rust right here. So I wanted to show you how I'm working on that. I've got my die set up right here, and I'm just screwing it in slowly from this side. I'll screw it in all the way until it meets up with this nut, and then I'll unscrew it down, and then you can see the difference in the threads. They're super clean here, and they're super surface rusty over here. Now this clean threading will make it a lot easier to finally unscrew this. Otherwise, what ends up happening is as you're unscrewing this, the vice grips that are clamped down on this terrible little squared edge here, it just doesn't hold this well enough to keep it from slipping. And then what'll happen is that end will get stripped up, and then you're just gonna have to get progressively tighter on the vice grips until you get frustrated and then slam your knuckles into something metal and make them bleed. So to avoid that, that's what the die is for. I just want to show you guys. All right guys, this shot is for those of you in climates that get rust. Look at this. I just pulled this bolt out. Look at this. The original body mount bolt. It's so freaking clean. I mean, there's just no rust on this thing. There's barely surface coloring. Crazy, huh? All right guys, at the assembly plant in probably Michigan on this truck, I don't know, maybe Kansas, I forget where they were making them in '79. But in the factory, when the cab is settled onto the frame, that is called the marriage. What I will be performing today is a divorce. Now, about 60% of the time, I think, when I'm removing the cab from the frame, I forget something. I'm very hopeful that this is going to be in the 40% where I got everything that I needed. Real simple, just a couple electrical connectors down to the bottom there. The fuel is no longer in the way. The electrical cables went in this little clip here. The brake line is attached to the body. The shifter linkage is unhooked. I think I'm good to go. I was able to get all 4 of those body mount bolts, and man, I don't know if I've ever seen cleaner bolts on a truck of this generation. So, should be good to go. I've got the lift ready. It's gonna go on these 4 corners. We'll lift it up, roll the chassis out, and then get this cart underneath it after I clean up my mess. Let's do it. Guys, I was so concerned about all of the body mounts and the wires and all that, I never unhooked the brake lines or the steering. So I wouldn't have made it very far. Let me take those off now. All right, I've got the brake lines all pulled and capped. I have both of the bolts that hold the steering linkage off of it, but there's not quite enough room in this little section here. You can't see inside, of course, but basically this shaft can move from about here to here, just to give it that little bit of play as the body is flexing. And unfortunately, that amount of play is not enough to get this shaft out. And that's probably due to the fact that the body mounts are pretty squished down, so it's a little bit tighter than it should be. I do not want to remove the steering column, so what I'm going to do is use the old lift here, and then I'll start to lift it up, and then that should give me enough distance that I can pull that steering shaft off. Once I do that, the body should come free, because of course I've gotten every connection figured out, and then we'll be good to go. All right, that doesn't count because that was the speedo wire. But this green one might count. Let's see where this goes. This is wire nutted to this red thing. All right, now we got to remember green wires hooked up to this red wire for some reason. That's not bad. Everything else is free. Alright guys, that's it for this build. Next week is going to be a follow-up, episode 4 of this resto-mod. Now if you've been following this channel for any amount of time, you may have noticed there's been a pretty large uptick in the last couple of weeks. Most of that came from the Cars and Cameras crew. They started filming a pretty cool build on a trophy cart. And because they called it a trophy cart, it seemed to link a lot of people over to my trophy truck build. And then on this recent Wednesday here, 2 days after Memorial Day, the little Google bots that live in the YouTube headquarters decided to feature me as their creator on the rise, which I didn't actually know existed, but apparently if you go to the home page and then the trending tab, beneath the channels that are actually trending, they've got a little section for a creator on the rise that they feature for 24 hours. That's just kind of somebody in my position, a smaller channel that they think might be appealing to the masses, I guess. But that was pretty cool. Got a nice little uptick from there. If you came from there, welcome to the channel. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you've made it this far into the 3rd episode at the very end, I guess you enjoy it. Now there was a few things that I wanted to do before I reached 5,000 subscribers so that I would have it ready to go, and that included things like merch. I wanted to make some t-shirts, and then I wanted to do a video on all the tools that I use that I've bought on Amazon, have an Amazon store so that you guys can then go there and then click the links, get the right tools, and then I get a little cut of it, which would be nice. I also wanted to start a Patreon so that I could make this channel viable long term. I haven't been able to do any of that because we blew right past 5,000. Again, great problem to have, but I am working on that for just future ideas. Now as far as merchandise goes, let me know what you guys think about this, but I didn't want to start a Teespring page because honestly I think they take a little bit too much of the money, and I think the prices are just a little bit too high. And if I'm going to be doing budget builds, I'd like to have budget merchandise. I want to be able to get it cheaply and then be able to offer it to you guys at that discount. So I'd still be making the same amount as if I sold it on Teespring, but it would cost you guys half as much. That's the idea. I'm working with a couple local companies to see if we can make that work, but again, it's going to be a little bit of time. Let me know if you like that idea, and let me know if you have any t-shirt ideas. A lot of people have mentioned, obviously, that I have a ton of repetitive sayings. This should be good to go, and it's pretty straightforward, and sucker, which I say all the time and I have to keep killing myself on, but I was thinking maybe integrating one of those into t-shirts. Let me know what you guys think. I guess that's it. See you guys next week.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.